Sauce.
Hey, you like Pez?
It looks like that. Here's Heaney from the boundary line. He's an expert at these. From the boundary line!
Hello and welcome to Behind the Boundary podcast. I'm your host, Pez. I'm here with Sauce, and we've just gone through week one of AFL finals. It was cracking. We had four great matches, even though there were a couple of 40-plus wins. And Sauce, how did you enjoy the first week?
As a football lover, Pez, it was great. We got to see, the real two teams that stood out. We saw Port Adelaide absolutely dominate and really put themselves into contention for a premiership, and we saw Melbourne flex their muscles as well. As well as that, we saw two fantastic games and really big comebacks. We saw the Swans throw away a last quarter attempt to try and win it back, and the Giants hold on for a victory. And we saw Essendon continue that terrible record that they've got and set a new record with going goalless in the second half of an AFL final.
Oh, it was great. You start off Friday night and you're thinking, what's going to happen here? Port Adelaide haven't beaten anyone, and they just go on a tear. The pressure was immense, and the turnovers that Port Adelaide were getting, which was creating score for them and goals for them, just had them in complete control of the whole match. And Geelong only had probably, you'd say Jack Henry probably took a few intercept marks. You know, we knew Tom Stewart wasn't going to be there and it would leave a big hole. I didn't think the hole would be that big, and Port Adelaide have said, they said it on the commentary a lot, Sauce, when Ken Hinkley said, don't judge us yet, judge us when you see what we do in finals. And pretty impressive to have what we think will be a home final at Adelaide Oval, barring some COVID outbreak. They're in a great position.
A great position, 100%, Pez. And we spoke about this last week. You know, they are basically guaranteed last week 2 home finals. And as you said, despite, maybe only barring a COVID outbreak, they've basically set themselves up for a prime position to make a grand final. And all year we've been talking about the flat track bully that they are. And my God, they literally looked like the schoolyard bully by the way they were pressuring, the way they were forcing Geelong to make terrible decisions and go long. Alia definitely proved his All-Australian worth and easily the recruit of the year. He would have to have, if they had Brownlow votes, Pez, he would easily get the 3 Brownlow votes. And it was a really, really ironic because that is what has, underpinned Geelong all year. They have been a team that has allowed their defence to get so many wins. And on Friday night, they allowed Alia, a very similar player, an intercept marker like Tom Stewart, to pick them apart.
Oh, he would get the votes if he just played the first quarter the way he was going. He was stopping Geelong there. They missed a couple of opportunities through Cameron as well early on, which could have put more scoreboard pressure on. But their pressure through the ground, just immense. Alia getting in the right spot, and it seemed like Geelong couldn't do anything but kick it in his direction, which I don't know what kind of structure that is. They just had to boot it long, and he's just reading the ball too well and in the right position. But after he does it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, maybe you got to rethink how you go forward.
Yeah, and we saw them, it's an interesting thing because I guess Geelong had misplanned who they thought Alia was going to play on, and they thought he was going to play on maybe Cameron or Tomahawk, and they sort of floated around. They tried to sort of tag him a little bit, and they used Gary Rowan, whose finals woes continues, and they sort of pushed him up forward, or actually back. Actually, isn't it funny that we're talking about an impact of game? And normally they say, they pushed him up forward. They actually pushed Alia down, further down into their forward line, but he still made impact, and Geelong just seemed to kick it straight to his area, and he was able to come across many times from that right hand angle, boom, grab a mark, get it off, and anchor their offense. That was an exciting, fast paced offense, and yeah, we worried about where they were going to get their goals from, Pez. We thought that Geelong's defence was going to stand up, but they picked Geelong right apart.
Oh, they did, and Fantasia gets in the right positions, and you got to wonder why players of this calibre just get on the loose at stoppages inside forward 50, or they're just by themselves running in there. You don't understand why sometimes. He had 4 goals, 1 before getting subbed out there. But the player that I was really impressed with watching him, and it's been for about a month now, he's not a high possession winner. He's not anything like that. But Willem Drew, and you might not notice him, he's got a strange number, 28. You don't know many players that wear the number 28, but the way he tackles and he does not let anyone through. You can't break his tackles. He's just a good find in a midfield where if you're going to put pressure on and you need tackles, he's the man to do it.
Pez, who you talking to didn't realise him, mate. A fellow ranger, of course I recognise him. No, I'm with you, Pez. About a month ago, he was one of those players that seems to always pop up in the right position, and he's probably 1 or 2 pre-seasons away from just getting that AFL touch that is. There's a little bit fumbly sometimes around the ball. Sometimes he misreads the footy, but the pressure that he's applying and putting himself in great spots, he was really impressive. And we're talking about a 12 touch player, Pez, but you could have picked anyone from Port Adelaide because Geelong really made them look good. And not only that, their stars really shone. You had Ollie Wines, who had 33, Travis Boak had 32, Carl Amon, Dersma, they all contributed to a really impressive Port Adelaide victory.
Yep, and when you get a prelim final berth and you know it's most likely going to be at your home ground, and if you're a Geelong side who, should have got top spot and been playing someone completely different and not away from home, you'd be ruining that game in round 23. But that performance there, all credit goes to Port Adelaide, and Geelong need to, do what they usually do. Lose in the first week of the finals, pick up in the next week, get a semi-final win and see if they can get over the line in a prelim.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have this conversation every year, actually. We've had this conversation, Pez, 8 out of 9 times over Geelong's last, sort of 12, 15 years of them being up the top. 9 times they've made top 4 and they've had the double chance, and 8 times they've actually walked away as loser. And I think it was the stat of about 6 times of that going in as the favourite. And again, this one, they weren't the favourite, but a lot of people had picked Geelong just because they are a team that just seems to get the job done. And, they find themselves in familiar territory, but they're going to come up against the Giants team that we're going to speak about that pipped them a couple of weeks ago, and they have basically set up the game plan of how to beat Geelong. Get the ball over the back of those defenders and get goals out the back. And we saw it with GWS, we saw it with your Saints, Pez, and on Friday night we saw it with Port Adelaide. Goals out the back, make it really easy, taking that middle of the road sort of kick, instead of just dumping it long, then going long from about 50 metres out.
Yeah, it's one thing that does interest me, Sauce, is the bye going to come into play as well? Because the teams that win in the first week, we've got Port Adelaide and Melbourne, they're not playing in the semis. Are they going to have a bye before the prelim? Are they going to have a bye after the prelim? When are they going to bring it in? Are they going to bring it in at all? That'll be another thing. You don't want your players having 2 weeks off from high-intensity AFL footy.
Yeah, it's going to be a really difficult one, and the way that players manage it and the way that coaches manage it without knowing the actual, the future, because we don't know if this is going to happen. There's rumours that it might be before the grand final. There's rumours that it might be, before the last final. It may not even happen. So I don't know how coaches go and plan it and make sure that they're giving their players the right recovery time as well as enough, match intensity. And it seemed what we saw Friday night and some of the other games of the weekend, it's going to be really hard to mimic that intensity, and also it's going to be really tough if they have to go 2 or 3 weeks with no playing.
Yeah, and we'll see. We'll wait and see what happens there. What we do know is we've got 2 terrific games next week. So the next game we talk about was a Saturday afternoon down in Tasmania. We had Sydney Swans taking on GWS, the Battle of the Bridge, and GWS with the 1-point victory to go 3-0 against Sydney in finals.
Yeah, an incredible record, especially, we spoke about this in the pre-show, Pez. They've only been in the league 10 years, and they've played, 3 times in finals now, and they've gone 3-0. So the younger brother and a really fierce rivalry of the Sydney Swans, they stand up in big moments. And do you know what, Pez, going into that last quarter, I thought Sydney were coming, and there were a lot of opportunities, especially where it brought back some memories of Lance Franklin, Hawthorn versus Adelaide, where you thought he was going to snag one and steal it and go on to win, but not to happen, and missed opportunities at the end. I think they kicked 4 or 5 points straight. They couldn't clutch the lead, and the GWS Giants held on. And Pez, as we said in the pre-show, if the Giants were to win, who stands up?
Oh, the main man, Toby Green. He 3 goals there in the first half, Sauce, and didn't have
first quarter.
He only had 10 disposals for the game, but the presence of him just being there and around the ball, he got a little bit lost in the third quarter, giving away a couple of free kicks and getting back into what he was doing. Had a massive incident with the umpire, which will be interesting to see the outcome of that, because that might be GWS's season on the line right there. But you speak about the Lance Franklin miss. I go back a bit further than that. The James Bell miss, about 15 metres out, pretty much directly in front. And you're thinking, all right, Sydney are going to take the lead here. They're going to get the next clearance. They're going to go down. They're going to get some breathing space. He misses that. The pressure just got added and added and added and added. And when it was put in Franklin's hands, you're like, oh, in the first or second quarter here, he kicked a beautiful one from about this exact same spot. He's going to get the ball, to bend from right to left, and it's going to sail through. And he just did not kick it that well. And GWS with the timekeeper at the end there, you notice that? The time kept going down when Toby Green had the ball. Should have been a few more seconds on the board. It wouldn't have made a difference. And GWS take away the win, and didn't they love it? The biggest performer for me, apart from Mr. Toby Green, was Jesse Hogan with all those contested marks inside the forward line. Sydney had no answer for him.
Yeah, he was impressive, and it's really good to see the young bloke really turn his career away. He's now a third club player, and he looked, his career was in disarray from going back from his time at Melbourne. But he really stood strong, Pez, and, Sydney didn't have an answer for him, and he really stood up in that fourth quarter. But when you go back to that James Bell, that incident, the goal that they did, the 5 minutes leading up to that, it was you could not see one of those beautifully charcoal jerseys anywhere. Every stoppage, there was just red and white swarmed around the pill, and opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, missed. And you're right, Pez. That one was really crucial, directly in front. He had the crumbs. He snagged one a little bit earlier of a similar sort of thing, crumbs, goal, and he just missed his boot completely, and that really, really ate into the Sydney mindset.
Oh, it just kept going and going. Heaney was fantastic, kicking 4 second half goals there, and should have probably had 5 as well with another set shot gone missing. But you think GWS were they too tired? They just couldn't put the effort in anymore. They were getting smashed around the contest heading into that fourth quarter, and it kept going, and Sydney just kept pushing and pushing, and it makes the win so much sweeter for the Giants when they were just able to get over the line. They had no run left, no nothing. They were just kicking it long down the line. Tom Hickey was great with a couple of intercept marks late in the game there to get the ball back inside 50 and give the Swans another chance after another chance, and it was just great drama-filled footy to watch.
Exactly right, Pez. And you mentioned it. It was a sweet victory, but it could be turned very quickly bittersweet with all the talk of the town, and the Battle of the Bridge has been talking all about the Toby Green incident. And what we relate to is at three-quarter time, Toby Green walking towards Matt Stevic, the umpire, pretty aggressively talking to him and obviously discussing some of the players' incident there, and then, not deviating his pathway, and what appeared on footage to be a right shoulder bump into Matt Stevic's shoulder as well, so shoulder on shoulder, and sort of bumped him out of the way. What are your thoughts on this, Pez? Because there's been a lot of media scrutiny about both sides of this. Yeah,
I'm going to add to it right now, but I've actually hated the scrutiny around it and it's not just with this Toby Green incident, it's with all incidences that are, going to be sent to the tribunal. Like, the commentators and the media kind of control how big a story is going to get. So depending on how much they blow it up and continue to talk about it, I felt like the game should have been spoken about a little bit more instead of getting into the incident. But you do have to speak about the incident now that all the dust is settled, and I think the rule states you can't touch an umpire, so it gets sent directly to the tribunal, and they'll get to decide what to do. I love Toby Green as a player source, but it's not a good look for the game. It's not a good look for the young kids watching. He definitely deliberately did it. He was looking straight past, arguing with him. It's not an accidental bump, and if they come out and say it's accidental, I'm going to find that a little bit far-fetched, but I think the AFL would be really disappointed as well, because they'd want Toby Green in a showdown against Geelong, and I'm not sure that that's going to be able to happen.
Yeah, I totally agree, Pez. It's very funny with this one. I'm obviously a Geelong supporter, and I saw a lot of people commenting like, it's good that he's not playing against Geelong, but for me, when I first saw the incident, I actually didn't think it was that bad, and I hadn't really thought of this. I actually thought that the umpire moved with him and there wasn't contact, and then you see that other angle, and it very clearly is contact. And I think what really steps out, and I was listening to a podcast today on Fox Footy, and David King was talking about what they need to do is it's very simple. The media shouldn't be talking about, oh, we want Toby Green to play. The media should not be talking about there's different rules for Toby Green. They should not be saying that there's different rules for finals. It is very clear in the rules. He has made contact with an umpire, and the rule changed 4 or 5 years ago with when Brent Harvey got done for tapping the umpire on the shoulder and said, hey, you need to look at this. The bloke's getting beaten up down there, and he got done. So if the contact is seen to be disrespectful, disgruntled, agitated, or aggressive, or on purpose, he gets weeks. And I hadn't thought about it this, Pez. You mentioned it. It filters down to the junior levels. It filters down to club level, and it's not a good look for the game. And the AFL, I wouldn't have even bothered sending this to the tribunal. I said to GWS, say, you know what? No, you can't argue that it's this, this, and this, because it's very blatant. It is. There's 3 weeks. We'll accept 2. You accept it as well. So no tribunal. You accept the 2 weeks.
Yeah, well, it's set in stone. You can't do it to the umpire. He didn't give the umpire a hug. We know that from the footage. So he's not going to get away with anything like that. So unfortunately, it is one of my favourite players to watch, and I'm probably not going to get it to watch him in an elimination cutthroat semi-final against the Cats next week. So GWS Giants are going to have to dig really, really deep if they're going to compete with Geelong next week without Toby Green.
Yeah, they will, Pez. All right, that gets on to our Saturday night, Pez, and this was an absolute cracking game. You had the afternoon where this 1-point clash, and it really built the anticipation of Melbourne, the team that snuck home a top finish, Brisbane, who snuck into the top 4. It was going to be absolutely an incredible game, Pez, and it really started off that way. It was a very fast scoring game, and we thought that the stars of the game, Charlie Cameron, I thought he was going to dismantle Melbourne in that first quarter. He looked incredible.
Oh, didn't he just? And Melbourne just had an answer for everything Brisbane threw at them in that first quarter. And Melbourne came out with a 1-goal lead because their pace through the middle, their link up through the middle, their decisions going inside forward 50 was just elite. And they've shown, again, why they are on top of the ladder. And I always seem to go against them, Sauce. I'm still
I'm the same.
Remembering back. But I thought Brisbane would have won on our podcast last week, and I ate my words there, because a 33-point win to the Demons, who pretty much dominated after quarter time. Brisbane had a couple of goes, where they came back to within a couple of goals, Sauce, but Melbourne just turned that gear on again. Wasn't Oliver and Petrarca just the main guys? They're super impressive, and especially Oliver in that midfield. He was a bull.
Bez, you sent me a text message during the actual game, as a lot of the players that were dominating them popping up, they're just nobody names. They're just players that just fit the blueprint of winning, and you're right, led by Clayton Oliver, led by Petrarca. Their forwards finally found form. Ben Brown was outstanding, so was Bailey Fritsch, and they just are just the workhorse pairs. They won the contested ball, they were dominating stoppages, and almost every single 50-50 ball they came up with, and not through luck, Pez. They were positioning themselves. They looked impressive on the run. And if you were to see this game, Pez, this game plan and this style every week, I would be all over them for the premiership, because they looked dominant.
Mate, Bailey Fritsch, he showed up with his 4 goals. Cozzy Pickett as well. Cozzy Pickett, he started off on fire. He hit the scene hard. And then he had that month of footy, Sauce, where he just went missing and he wasn't popping up on the goal scorers. And didn't he love kicking a couple there at Adelaide Oval? So that's the other thing. That's impressive for Melbourne. They should have been playing this at the MCG if it was, normal times. We know it's not. And at Adelaide Oval, to be able to do that to a Brisbane Lions side that I consider to be pretty strong. They've had a rough end to the season, but a pretty strong side. No Hipwood and McStay going off early didn't help their structure. But Melbourne, super impressive for mine. Those players, again, just absolutely unbelievable. Their diverse forward line, we didn't know if it was going to work with Ben Brown in there. Tom McDonald, he only touched the ball 4 times for the game. And it seems to work with, you got Fritsch, you had Sparrow pop up as well. He put some pressure on up that forward line. It was good to see.
But Pez, they dominated, and they probably could have won by more. They had 15 marks inside 50. They had 68 to 45 inside 50s alone. The contested marks around the ground, they were just all over Brisbane, and I'm with you, Pez. I thought Brisbane were a pretty decent team. They were, they definitely showed signs of the last month or so of being one of those dominant sides, and Melbourne made them look second rate, Pez, and they, Melbourne really deserved to be one win away from a grand final.
Yeah, disappointing that the self-proclaimed barometer barometer. He couldn't come in that first quarter. He had a big opportunity there and couldn't do it, Mr. Matheson. So, he's got to go back to the drawing board and maybe get himself a new nickname. But it was high pressure, high intensity footy, and you've got to give it to Melbourne, and Melbourne fans get excited. You're heading off to the prelim. It's obviously not going to be in Melbourne, but depending where it is and depending who they play, they could be finding themselves in the grand final.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel for those Melbourne supporters, Pez, that they're into a prelim, and then most of the Melbourne supporters that haven't been able to see them win that often are not going to get the opportunity to potentially see their team in a grand final. So you really feel for those people. But Pez, I know who you don't feel for, and that is Essendon fans, because wow, they were, and you know what? I'm going to address this straight away, Pez. I don't want to talk about the umpiring past this little section we do at the start, because all I've seen is how umpires cost Essendon the game. Mate, they didn't score a goal in the second half. They were absolutely putrid, and they did not play wet weather footy. The umpiring doesn't come into it for me.
Have you seen Essendon lose any time? That's always the narrative. It's always the narrative. And I noticed this account on Twitter. I should have got what it was called. It's about the umpiring, and they say, was the free kick there? And they say yes or no, and the bloke's an umpire, and he's got about 4,000. He's got about 4,000 followers now, and he's going on about some different things, and all the Essendon fans are just tweeting him over and over, and he's just going, yes, the free kick was there. You can't hit him in the head. And they're saying, oh, but I've never seen that paid before. Like it's happened so many times throughout the season. Happens 10 times a game. And he said, find me 10 times in a year, and I'll be surprised. So he was going pretty strong at that.
The page, Pez, has the umpire made a bad decision, and it's fantastic. He literally goes through with a toothpick comb, goes through, pulls out all the errors, he justifies it, he quotes rules, he quotes other precedents from around the ground. And I understand Essendon's frustration is because 3 of those controversial free kicks resulted in Cody Waitman goals. And does finals need that sort of officiating? Maybe not. But that's what the umpire was doing. They were there. Most of them were there. I would say most of them were there.
3 out of 4.
And it wasn't the umpiring. It was your style of football. The moment it started
carelessness.
Yeah, the moment it started pissing down, they went completely away from their game plan. They had the Bulldogs on the ropes in that first quarter when they were dominating a lot of the play, and they let it slip away.
Look, I honestly thought Essendon had the rub of the green in that first quarter there, and a few of the clubs on the weekend benefited from the stupid rule that is the protected area zone, where the player doesn't impact it. And I think the 50-metre penalty for that action, where the player's running behind the other player, he hasn't even seen him, he can't feel him, can't hear him, doesn't affect the play whatsoever, and you get a 50-metre penalty shot at goal. Essendon got on the good end of that early on and kicked a goal from it, and they only kicked 4 for the game. You mentioned they didn't kick a goal in the second half. They fought tooth and nail in that first half, though, Sauce, just before it started to absolutely piss down at half-time. But the Dogs just kept going, kept pushing. Liberatore in the middle, one of the best games, I think, that I've seen him play. Just 35 disposals in there, tight, contested in the middle. McRae had plenty of it, 36 on the outside. I thought Parrish was really good for Essendon. And Treloar was fighting really hard with 28 disposals as well. The Bont was well contained in that first quarter with 2 disposals, but he fought it out in the end and was able to push the ball forward. And as you said, the Bulldogs played better wet weather footy when I thought maybe this would suit Essendon.
Yeah, when the game was on the line, Pez, people you spoke about, Liberatore, Bontempelli, Lockie Hunter, and even Jack McRae, they all came away with really important clearances that they just were smarter with the footy. They end up, I know they end up blowing it out by 40 points in the end, but it was probably a 4 or 5, it was probably 4-goal game. That's how much better they were in terms of just controlling the footy, making smarter decisions, and not letting the emotions of feeling taken advantage of by the umpires take over. And that's what Essendon need to do. I think for Essendon, a lot of the time they play into the own narrative of having this big, we haven't won a final in so many days and this and this. There's a reason that each year you guys scrape into finals and then the next year you miss it. you're almost there. I believe in Essendon next year that if they need to make that jump, but I think there's a level of mentality to it as well. They need to not buy into the narrative that none of those players would have ever played, in the last couple, or a couple of them would have, but like in those last finals. They've got a good young core. Listen, start playing the right footy, and just be smart about it.
Yeah, they've got a lot of players on their list here, or in their 22 on the weekend. I was really disappointed with their forward line, actually, Sauce, and their effort in that forward line. You had Jake Stringer, who I think put in a great effort, kicked his 2 goals in that first half, and was continuing to try throughout the game and really do that. You had 2-meter Peter up there, 7 goals last time. What did I say to you? I said he's not getting 7 this time, and the Bulldogs will have a win. He did get 7 disposals, though, so that might be a bit of a consolation prize for him. And Aaron Francis, who was playing up forward there, Sauce, really struggled, I thought, in his final there. Will Snelling couldn't hit a target going inside 50. You had Waterman, who's a beautiful set shot at goal, but he was struggling when the ball was loose on the ground as well. In that wet weather, you just can't afford to have that many passengers that are just there across, not putting on pressure, not hitting their kicks, not getting the ball forward. And Essendon fans, as much as you do want to blame the umpires, the Bulldogs kicked the shit out of them in that second half.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it there, Pez. There were a lot of passengers for Essendon the moment it started raining, and it sort of, and Jake Stringer, I think, was a perfect example for that. Early on, he was a bit of a front runner early on, though. He was dominant, and then when it was easy, he was good. But when the game got tough and it needed a star to stand up, unfortunately, Darcy Parish didn't have anyone else to back him up. He was trying his heart out, but there was no one else that stood up. The better team won at the end of the day. And I said to a mate on Friday night, realistically, we had a 15-win team playing an 11-win team. And that really showcased when the game got tough and the game was in the balance. And, the Bulldogs were commanding for setting up a really good final spot next week.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm surprised that Essendon had Mick Cox as the sub as well, and couldn't get him on the ground. You'd think you'd want to play him on the field over a lot of other players there, and you would have liked to have him there available. But they're young players that have been impressive this year. Perkins, he struggled up forward on a wet day, and you can't blame him too much. You had Cutler down back who really struggled as well. I thought Ridley stood up and played a good game across half back. So there's positive signs there for Essendon, but at a half time, they would have thought we're in with a good shot here, a good effort, starting to rain. This is our type of footy, and they really missed Tip and Woody, I think.
Yeah, they did. And I think during wet weather footy really suits him, and it would have been someone that would have sparked them a little bit in that forward line. But as I said, Pez, unfortunately, not unfortunately, but the best team won on the day. And, I know it's easy to blame umpires and passengers and whatever, but realistically, the Western Bulldogs should have finished top 4, and they snuck out, and they're in a really good position now. They play the Lions next week. Realistically, that'll be a really close game. Both teams were fighting for top 4, and we've got Geelong taking on the Giants next week on the Friday night game. So 2 cracking finals next week, but unfortunately for those other teams, Pez, the season's over.
Oh, season's over, and it's not over for Essendon and Sydney, because we have to do our season over here with the 4 teams that we didn't do from last week's Sauce, and these 2 eliminations from the finals.
Season over.
And isn't it just perfect? A bit of somber music there in the intro at the end, like, bang, the season's over, we're done for. But the season's not over for the teams we haven't spoken about here on Behind the Boundary Sauce. We spoke about North Melbourne, Collingwood, Gold Coast, Adelaide, Hawthorn and Carlton last week, and gave them some reality checks with our hashtags. So this week we've got the next 4 in the bottom 10, and the Essendon and Sydney Swans.
Yes, we do, Pez. So we're going to go through all those teams and finish up, Pez. And I like what you said there, a little bit somber, because it is a little bit somber for some of these teams. These are the teams that, a lot of fans and a lot of them were fighting for a top 8 berth, and some of them really, really had disappointing ends to the season. And, you can directly pinpoint for most of them where they stuffed up and where they cost themselves a finals berth.
Yeah, and the Sydney Swans will be really easy to see where they stuffed up and all those shots at goal that they missed to lose by a point. But we have to start down at 12th position, and this is it's kind of the middle run teams, isn't it? So we had the bottom 6 last week. We're going to do the middle 6 this week, and then we'll do the top 6 in the weeks to come as we go. But the Richmond Football Club to finish 12th here on 38 points, it was really disappointing for them. It started with them not wanting to travel to Marvel Stadium. Their coach openly admitting that, and it's, they just don't have the same meat pies over there and whatever it is. And Richmond were fighting. Injuries succumb. Other things succumbed as well, and other teams just were able to work them out, able to get over the top of them, and they lost games that they would usually just get over the line in previous years. So I don't know if Dynasty's over or whatnot. That was the big narrative going towards the end of the season when they were losing those games, Sauce. So what do we got for Richmond?
I've got hashtag you've got to be kitten me. Because I think that I've got 2 reasons for it. Because Dynasty over, I don't think so. I think you've got to be kidding. As you said, their season was fueled with a range of injuries. Not only that, they basically had their whole back line was out. David Ashbury, Noah Bolter, Broad, Basher Hooley, Nick Voston, they were all hurt through big chunks of that season. Then the second part of it is you got to be kidding me, because we have definitely seen this coming. We called it last year in the finals. This club is slowly unraveling in terms of their off-field things. There's something going on in Richmond, and they're doing a very good job to contain it. But there's something that just has a little bit of disconnect from the football department and their on-field performances. As you said, Pez, normally they just do Richmond things and they persevere and they get through. Dusty went down towards that end of the season, and the moment Dusty went down, the heart and soul, that was it. Season over.
It was absolutely gone, and usually I'd make a big fun and joke and try and have a laugh at the expense of these clubs, the Sauce. But this hashtag, I've gone pretty serious, and I've just gone hashtag prove your worth. So if you're still there at the Richmond Footy Club and you're on the list there, you have to really turn things around this next season. You've got the aging list there. You've still got the core players. You brought Tom Lynch down from the Gold Coast. You got Jack Rewalt there, who's getting on in age. You got Dion Presti, if you can keep him on the park in that midfield. Jaden Short down back. You've got all these core players that can be a finals team. So on paper, everyone's going to be picking them for finals next year. Can they get back to the Richmond brand of footy, or is that Richmond brand of footy dead because everyone else has worked it out? And what does Damien Hardwick do? And prove your worth, not just for the players, it's for the coach as well. Prove your worth. What are you going to do to adapt and continue to go? It's hard to win 3 out of 4 years, but it's even harder to stay up the top for even longer. I
love that point, Pez, about the game plan, because the game plan definitely has been analysed and scrutinised by every club for the last 4 or 5 years. And they continued to go to it even when they didn't have the cattle. When they had all these injuries and they were unable to play that brand of footy, they still persevered with it. And, this off-season is going to be really, really prolific with how they're actually going to move forward, because they need to make some changes. They need to make some adjustments. They can't just believe that having this list is enough. You talk about those teams that just scrape in. We just spoke about Essendon and Pez. Them next year, for them, it's not enough just to do exactly what they did this year. Because for Richmond, they've been found out a little bit. Their game plan has underpinned. It wasn't because they performed poorly. They were doing the same things as they were 3 or 4 years ago with a better game plan. Everyone else has caught up.
Yeah, that's the thing. And you've just got to turn that list over again. I'm sure there'll be some free agents that would like to go to Richmond and continue to go and try and push for that top 8, even top 4, and try and go for another premiership. But it's in their hands, and they're the ones that have to adapt to everyone else changing around them and getting better around them. But with the cattle, luck does play a part, and with the right cattle there and staying on the park, it does make a big difference, but it's not all the excuses, and they don't get away with any excuses because they had a poor season.
And you're right, Pez. When you win premierships and you have a dynasty there, excuses don't count for anything. And, the one team that we're going to talk about next, Pez, is the Freya Dockers, who finished 11th. And there are a lot of people that could make some excuses for some of their performances this year.
Yeah, well, 10 wins, and one of their, not wins, but losses was probably the last round of the season, Sauce, where they went down by 60-odd points to a St Kilda side that couldn't make the finals, where Fremantle still had hope alive if they got over the line, and they couldn't do it down there in Tassie, which was disappointing. But I might start this one off. I think Fremantle a strange side because they're really impressive some weeks at home, Sauce, even in some games without their captain, Nat Fyfe, who was injured for different injuries throughout the season and missing a lot of games. Really impressive at home. And at the start of the season, the first half of the season, they struggled to play and win away from home. So injuries and away play. I've got hashtag hospitalised away from home.
Ooh.
Because they've been put in that ambulance and rushed off whenever they travel interstate. Okay, so especially that Tasmania game at the end, they had a chance to do it and just couldn't do it. Their grand final was the week before when they beat their rivals West Coast to pretty much knock them out of the finals, and they were so impressive. And they've got those young players, Sarong and Chera, but unfortunately, Chera's asked for a trade already at the end of the season. So that's a huge blow to Fremantle in their development. You had Nat Fyfe, who could have gone anywhere he wanted, and he stayed on to help fight with this list when they got in that grand final, and then they're continuing to try and build their way back up. They've got a good coach there, I think, and their game plan is actually one that helps them when they don't have the cattle. So they've got to continue to try and get the cattle. The Chera decision to leave, though, isn't going to help that very much. You had Walters injured for most of the season as well, which adds to my hashtag there.
Yeah, you captured so many different points there, Pez, and I couldn't agree more with all of them there. I definitely agree that they need to win away from home. They let perfect opportunities go through their grasp, and realistically, we shouldn't be talking about 11th, Pez. We shouldn't have been talking about the 9th. They should be a top 8 side, and this is my hashtag. Hashtag anchor point, Pez. 2 reasons. 15 times this year, they kicked more behinds than goals. Now, if you want to be a top 8 side, you do that, take that to 7 times. That's 7 more wins, right?
Big problem.
And that's a huge problem. And the second point, an anchor point, Pez, is a term used in archery. And what it is, it's when the archer pulls it back towards their chin and it stabilises. You're kicking goals, you don't have all these problems. It stabilises. Adam Chera probably doesn't want to run away from the club if they finish 6th and 5th. And they've got this great young core. They've got Fyfe and Walters coming back. He might say, you know what, I might sign on for 1 more year here because we've got a real sniff. They were, one of the number, I think it was the number 4th team in clearance differential. They were dominating clearances. All they needed to do was put it on the scoreboard, and there's nothing that you really can look at this side and go, you know what, they were unlucky, their game plan. Everything works. They're a defensive-minded side that really puts scoreboard pressure on. Yes, it is points, but they do put a lot of scoreboard pressure on. And the West Coast win that we talked about, what happened? They kicked 7 straight goals. And that makes a huge difference, doesn't it? They put the pressure on, they were ahead, and then slowly, as West Coast started coming, they started slipping up. And that's what they've got to do. They've got to, really anchor down that aspect of their game. And we talk about this about one side every year, Pez. One side throws it away through missing inaccuracy. The last couple of years, it has been Melbourne. They get it together. Look where they are. They finish top.
Yeah, well, I think we hit the nail on the head with Fremantle there from both. We talked about the injuries, their wins at home and their struggles away, and their inaccurate goal kicking, because they average 10 goals and 12 behinds. So you got to average more goals than behinds, and that's a start.
It is a start, Pez. And speaking of start, I might handball it straight back to you, Pez, for the 10th place, and probably a team that we're going to be talking about some of the similar things from Fremantle. Is a really disappointing season for St Kilda, especially after what they had last year.
Yeah, well, you go from a season where you win a final against the Bulldogs, who are still alive, and you lose to Richmond, who won the premiership last year in a semi-final. So this year, everyone was expecting them to be in that bottom half of the 8. And with their recruits and things, I know they were missing some stars, and they didn't play Rowan Marshall and Paddy Ryder every week together because they couldn't. Ryder wasn't available for whatever reasons, and then injuries came a part of it as well. But there's no excuses here for this, and my hashtag is hashtag Recruit City Plan C, because they've gone through 2 seasons, Plan A of recruiting, Plan B. Now they need to get to Plan C. Do they continue to recruit, or do they just try and stabilise what they've got and try and get a game plan that works every single week? There was way too many big losses. Essendon 75 points, Richmond 86 points, Port 54 points, and even more. And then a couple of games where they really competed and played really well. They were in the game against Port Adelaide and Sydney in the last weeks of the season, Geelong as well. And they're all playing finals. So they can do it. They can be in those games, but they can't be losing by that margin, and they can't be losing to teams that don't even make the finals as well. So they deserve to finish 10th, deserved out of the finals, but a very disappointing season for St Kilda and their fans.
I'm glad you finished on that point, Pez, because that leads straight into my hashtag. And you need to bear with me here, Pez, because I really struggled to actually formulate what I wanted here. So I've gone hashtag Max the Confessor. Now, you're probably sitting there going, well, I don't really understand that. Max is for the Max King. This references the patron saint of kings, Pez. Now, patron saint of kings was Edward the Confessor, and he was a king of England. And there's big discrepancies with his portrayal because he's always portrayed in two ways. He's portrayed as Edward the Confessor, as the king that had one of the most unsuccessful reigns as leader, that had a lot of really big victories, but then broke down the whole kingdom and put England under a whole lot of scrutiny. So, you know, those performances where they turn it up to the game, they should win, they don't win, and they really set themselves up for failure. The other way that they're portrayed is that he's one of the most successful kings because of the way he had a presence, of his energy, his resourcefulness in terms of his recruiting. And otherwise, most of the times he was very ruthless in his decision makings, obviously making the first attack, and that was the Jekyll and Hyde of St Kilda's football. A couple of times, Pez, and a couple of times after a couple of bevies, you and I had phone calls and it was like, why? What was the difference for tonight? And you're like, effort. It literally was effort. And it was like, what is the difference and how come some weeks they can bring it and some weeks they can't? And it's inconsistency for the Saints that cost them a top 8 side.
Yeah, and that fits really well because you've got Max King there and he was pretty inconsistent. I know a 20-year-old forward and you're not expecting the world from him, but he had some really disappointing games where, he had a lot of appeal and kicked a lot of behinds, but then he had some really good games. West Coast, first half against Geelong when he hadn't done his groin, and he's a really dangerous player who finished in the top 5 in contested marks in the league, and he can kick a really big bag of goals and be a 50-plus goal kick for the Saints, and that's what he needs to be for St Kilda to be able to take that next step. But they also need to keep him on the park and look after him if he's going to get injured like that. Yeah, in Geelong, but I like that.
I 100% agree, Pez, because I think a lot of people focus on his goal kicking, and as you said, he's a 20-year-old kid. He's going to have deficiencies playing at the elite level. Huge stride for him is that he started actually clunking some of those marks, and we saw him basically destroy Geelong in the first quarter before he went off, with a bit of an injury. And what's really good is that goal kicking will come. I mean, he booted 38 goals this year off 20 games. Yes, he kicked a lot more behinds, but he's still a young kid. He's taking more positive sets. He's putting himself in contested places to be able to take those marks. He's starting to have some really good leading patterns, and he's starting to, a couple of times, really stamping himself on a game, and that's what you want from your big, bustly forward, Pez. So that's really important for them and for him moving forward into next season.
You'd have to be saying to him, mate, you've only got one more preseason and season without your brother there in the forward line with you. So what are you going to do? You're going to have to show us what you got here. Kick 60 goals this season, and then you're the number 1 man and your brother Ben can be number 2.
I like it, Pez. I like it. And you heard it here first at Behind the Boundary. The King Boys reunite next, 2023?
2023.
There we go, Pez. Well, hopefully by then he's already sort of established himself as one of the key forwards. And I know you picked him as a cheeky this year as to win the Coleman, Pez, but he is in really good stead next year for a top 5 finish in the Coleman.
Oh, 100%. And he has to do that, and the Saints have to have a better season than last year. But I think the next side is probably more disappointing here, Sauce. We've got the West Coast Eagles. Their absolute list, their powerhouse list of 2018 with many players there. I know Yo missed a lot of the start of the season, but they had the players there. Liam Ryan was missing as well after the first season, and they were just no good in the end.
No, I disagree, Pez. Hashtag red-tailed hawks. Do you know what a red-tailed hawks is?
Oh, it's some kind of hawk, I'd imagine.
Yep, it's one of the most mistaken birds for an eagle, and that's what they are, Pez. They are pretenders. They are absolute pretenders because, as we said, they get half their games in Perth. They should win. They've sucked about it for the last 2 years. Their game plan was exposed this year. They put up some absolutely disgusting performances. 97 points to Geelong. Back-to-back losses to, over 50 points to the Dogs. 92 to Sydney. And then coming in with a loss to the last place, North Melbourne. Then, a couple of weeks later, doing the same thing to Collingwood. They are pretenders that let themselves win games at home that set themselves up. Think of how bad they were the back end of the season, and they only just missed out on finals, Pez. I think that their list is too old, and I called it at the start of the season. I didn't think that their list was good enough to be in finals, and, I say this almost every year, but it's about time that it actually paid off.
Yeah, it's got to come eventually, and it's paid off this year. And my hashtag isn't much better for them. They're not called the Weagles sauce. It's hashtag Weakles because they were really weak in some of those performances. And yeah, you probably missed one where they should have won. They were up, 4 or 5 goals against St Kilda and ended up losing by 20 right in one quarter of footy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just not on. And they could have easily made the finals. They had a chance, in front of their full home crowd against Fremantle and were lost to the team that they hardly ever lose to. And Fremantle still didn't even make it. So West Coast, they had their chances and just couldn't do it. Interesting to see what Adam Simpson does here as one of the highest paid coaches in the league. How's he going to turn this around? And is there any way to turn them around and for them to go up, Sauce, or are they still going to go down?
Well, Pez, I would hope that he did more than he did last season because, to me, they didn't do anything. They didn't recruit well. They didn't get any better. They basically, I think, approached the season of, we had a bad year in COVID last year. That's the only reason that we didn't make, we only just scraped through to finals. And if we just do exactly what we did last year, we'll make it. And they did. They did exactly what they did last year, Pez. Poor pressure. They were too many broken tackles. They were poor, and I love your hashtag because they were weak. It was a weak effort from a very established, successful football club, and it's disappointing.
Yeah, it definitely was. And that rounds out the bottom 10, Sauce. We've spoken about the bottom 10, and there's 2 more sides that we get to hashtag for, and the team that finished 8th, Essendon, losing to the Bulldogs by over 40 points yesterday down in Tasmania. It's a very easy hashtag for me, and I'm not sure it will be for you.
For me, it is really easy, Pez, and I'm going to get in first. Mine's hashtag don't even. Sorry, hashtag Essendon don't even. So Essendon don't even. There we go. I eventually got through it. And that's exactly what Essendon did, mate. They eventually got through into the finals. And what I'm going to say is reference to is don't even mention the 6,203 days, Pez, because it is breaking next year. This was a really positive season for Essendon. A lot of people had them not making finals and not being in contention. And the last couple of teams we've spoken about what went wrong. What went right for Essendon is they had some absolutely impressive jumps in growth. Darcy Parish was outstanding. Zach Merritt, Jaden Laverde early on was inspirational. Nick Cox, Harry Jones, Archie Perkins, they had huge contributors this year. And what's most important is don't even bother about this season because you weren't meant to make it. Do not miss finals next year. Too many teams lose by 40 points in the first week of finals by scraping into 8th. And they miss the finals. We look at Melbourne, North, Essendon themselves are going back a couple of years ago. Don't worry about this season because you weren't meant to make it. All guns blaring for next season and 2022.
Well, you think they're on the upwards and going from there. Now, I think this was probably the second best thing that could have happened. So I had them in the bottom 4, Sauce, and it didn't pay out in the end. But I actually enjoyed it more that they made the 8 and then got flogged in the second half down at a wet Tasmania. It was awesome to hear all the Essendon fans' excitement leading up to it. They actually thought they were going to win because they beat the Bulldogs a few weeks before that. But I'm just thinking 2-metre Peter kicked 7 goals straight that day, and he's definitely not doing that again. And the Bulldogs were missing Stephen Martin, which they have been for a majority of the year now. You said I'm not allowed to say, don't even mention 6,203. So my hashtag is 6,204. We got to add the extra day on.
Well, Pez, at minimum, it's going to be 6,567.
You got to love it.
Look, it is a bit of a laughing point, but I think that, if Essendon walk away from this all doom and gloom, then they've already got next season, it's already beaten for them because they have got a lot of young talent. I spoke to an Essendon fan early in the week, and I think all they did was they went 2-gun hold with some of their young stars. Archie Perkins, Nick Cox, the fact that he had to be the sub, there's a reason for that because he really was struggling getting to the end of the season, and he'll go through another preseason. Some of those young legs will get another run through. They'll come in healthier. They'll come in with a better game plan. And, Jake Stringer, we know what he's about now. All he needs to do is put the work in and build that engine, and they can be a contender in 2022, Pez. I don't know if they can win the whole thing, but I think they can definitely in contention for top 4.
Yeah, well, they're going to... I don't know. I'm hoping they're in contention for bottom 4. That'd be fantastic as well. Or because if they make the finals again, they wouldn't want to lose it, and they wouldn't want that reign to keep going, which is 17 plus years now that it'll be, which is absolutely amazing. So that was the easiest hashtag for mine.
Pez, it wasn't the easiest one for me. I really struggled with that one, as you can probably tell. Not only to get through it, but to think of it. The next one, Pez, was one that I didn't think I'd actually be talking about because I think most people thought that the Swans would do the Giants on the weekend, but we have to talk about the Sydney Swans, who finished 7th.
Yeah, they did the Giants, but this is a really disappointing loss for them. And the reason it's a disappointing loss is because they had so many more wins during the season than the Giants. They finished on 60 points. The Giants finished on 46 and really scraped home after a disappointing start to the season. But for whatever reason, they've got their measure. You know, the Giants have a lot of stars, but so does Sydney. And Luke Parker tried his best. We had Buddy kicking 3, Heaney kicking 4. And just at the end there, when they couldn't get over the line and they couldn't get that score, you thought it was coming. Then it got down to 2 minutes and you're like, shit, GWS can hold on here.
Mm-hmm.
This is insane. And there was one point you thought, maybe they just need to scrape, just get another point just in case you can't get the goal and go into extra time. Because if that goes to extra time, you think Sydney are going to run all over the top of them. So I've just got a hashtag here, Buddy Heaney, in relation to bloody Heaney. He could have kicked the 5th. He's come out. He was an absolute star in that 3rd quarter and in the 4th quarter, and they just couldn't get it. Buddy done.
Pez, that's one of your best hashtags ever. You've actually done a little bit of research. You're a little bit funny, Pez, and that is a great hashtag because that's exactly what they were doing. And, you know, Buddy Heaney is exactly right because they were too Buddy-centric going into that forward line. There were 7 attempts at them going forward. You could see the frustration in Buddy Franklin. He's like, you know, and he's a player that always wants the pill. They're sometimes like, what are you doing? Stop kicking it to me. You've got Heaney over there. You've got some of the other young stars in there. Papley was popping up. They needed to disperse the, the footy around and set up a different game plan and a different avenue for goal.
Yeah, and they couldn't get it done. They got 7 out of those 7 goals, so it wasn't too bad. But James Bell, that miss, he's going to not have a very good preseason and going into next year because Sydney, they were a really impressive side, you know, coming up from the bottom and finishing 6th and probably could have finished a little bit higher. They had a couple of struggles against some lower teams throughout the season, but GWS get to go through and Geelong might get a free pass without Toby Green. So that's another thing.
That is something, Pez. Right, for my hashtag, Pez, you're going to love this one. Hashtag Ron Swanson. Now,
hey!
Ron Swanson, I know you've been getting your way through Parks and Rec. For people who don't know Parks and Rec, it is a great, fantastic show. And Ron Swanson is this big, no bullshit, no business, all power sort of a bloke. And one of his great quotes, Pez, is, "You will grow from boys to men, from men into gladiators, and from gladiators into Swansons." And that's exactly what we saw this year, is the young talent that Sydney have is scary, Pez. All of these names I'm about to roll off, Pez, under 25. And actually, one of them is not. Isaac Heaney is 25 and 3 months. Okay, so I'll put him first. Isaac Heaney, Errol Goulden, Justin McKerney, James Rowbottom, Jordan Dawson, Will Haywood, Isaac Heaney, as I mentioned, Callum Mills and Chad Warner. The future is extremely bright. Tom McCartan is one of those ones as well, I forgot. And for them, this is the best thing to happen for them, to into a final where they probably should have won. For them to lose, they'll come back with a fight and an absolute fire in the belly, Pez. Look out 2022 because the Swans are coming.
Geez, they're going to be a good side. Another preseason into all of those players. And then they've got their top-end stars as Parker, Kennedy, Franklin and co. That will be a dangerous side, and you won't want to play them next season at the SCG.
No way. I didn't want to play them this year in the finals. Yeah. I'm very glad that GWS did that, Pez. Not that I'm confident about that either, but a lot more confident than I would be playing Sydney.
Yeah, very interesting. But we have to get into our finals preview later in the week, Sauce. When there's more information, everything's coming out. We'll keep an eye on all the news throughout the week and keep you up to date on the Toby Green incident as well when we record just before the 2 finals we have this week. Only 5 games of AFL left for the season, Sauce, and it looks like Melbourne lockdown is going to be extended for a while longer, which is going to be pretty tough without footy.
What's the next sport that comes up after footy, Pez? I think we got into the netball last time. Is that still going?
Look, I think after the NBL had a 65-game final series with the final 2 teams, I think they're ready to start again.
The NBL shouldn't be far away from kicking off, Pez, so we should be ready for 7 games in the one day, but we have to enjoy and really enjoy what's coming up in terms of the football, Pez, because we've got 2 cracking games next week. Make sure you're tuning to our show Friday afternoon. Hopefully it's up, Pez. We are recording a little bit later to get all the information, especially after some of the bets that we placed this week.
Oh, yeah, and we will speak about that and do our bet review this upcoming week, which was absolutely topsy-turvy, up and down round. As you could tell from our previews, we didn't tip too well in the winners in the first final series. Hopefully we can get 2 out of 2 this week, Sauce. But at Behind the Bound on Twitter, we've got our emojis and our results up there, our round results and season results. So make sure you jump on board, have a look at what's up there, and we'll be discussing that and see if Sauce can comprehend what emojis are there on Thursday or Friday. So we'll see you then. I've been Pez. Peace out.
The only thing I'm comprehending, Pez, is 18th of November. NBL preseason starts. All right.
Oh, here we go.
I'm still Sauce. We'll catch up next time, guys.